You can improve your investigations if you spend a couple minutes doing this one thing, and if you're an aspiring SOC or DFIR analyst, you don't want to skip this. As someone working in DFIR, time is money, and when it comes to finding interesting artifacts on a computer, such as a malicious software, we usually don't have enough time to completely reverse engineer it and find what it might be capable of, especially if you have a small team. Instead, we see if the hash exists on the internet, and if it does, great. If not, well, in the scenario that the hash does exist on the internet, one of my go-to tools is ANY.RUN, who is kindly sponsoring this video. By the end of this video, you'll learn what ANY.RUN is and why it is important to spend some time analyzing IOCs, indicators of compromise, during your investigation. With that being said, let me first introduce you to ANY.RUN. ANY.RUN is an interactive malware analysis / hunting platform where analysts such as you and I can hunt for new threats and understand the behaviors while uncovering additional IOCs that we can then use to threat hunt in our own environment. Or if you come across a particular file on an endpoint that was flagged as malicious, you could then also utilize ANY.RUN to analyze the file to again learn its behaviors and uncover additional IOCs. ANY.RUN offers 3 products. One is their sandbox, and the other is their threat intelligence lookup and feed. The sandbox will allow users to interact with potential malware in a safe environment while showing its processes, network communications, and alerts that an IDS, intrusion detection system, would generate. By utilizing the sandbox, you can obtain a wealth of information on that one particular file that you're analyzing. So then you can use what you learn to help you come to a conclusion that much quicker in your investigation. The threat intelligence lookup is essentially a large database where you can perform lookups to obtain additional context to a suspicious indicator that you found in your environment. These can be hashes, IP addresses, domains, processes, events, and many more. In addition to lookups, you can also utilize its threat intelligence feed by integrating this with other tools such as a SIM for data enrichment. One of the many cool features provided by this platform is that you'll have the opportunity to see which malware families are gaining popularity, which is always nice to know. However, do note that the Threat Intelligence Lookup is a paid subscription, but you can get a free 14-day trial if you want to check it out. Now that you know a little bit more about what ANY.RUN is and has to offer, let's talk about how to get started with the sandbox. To sign up for an account with ANY.RUN, you must have a business email. Or you can sign up with a personal email like Gmail, but you'll be required to write directly to them via X or LinkedIn for verification purposes. Once you have registered for an account, you'll be presented with 3 different options. The first one is submit file/email, the second is submit URL, and the third is check suspicious links. And you'll select either one depending on your use case. Before moving on, I did want to point out the terms for a free account. When using a free account, you can only use 3 operating systems for analysis: Windows 7 32-bit, Windows 10 64-bit, and Ubuntu 22.04 64-bit. Everyone can add up to 4 minutes to their task by pressing the plus icon in the top right corner, so it's 5 minutes for the free account. The max input file size is 16 megs, which could hinder your progress if the file that you're interested in is larger than that, but it's usually enough. At the end of the day, a free account does have its purpose, and it's something that I've been using for quite a long time. One of the main sections that I highly recommend you utilize is the report section that you can find on the left-hand side. This will allow you to search for your IOC of interest to see if ANY.RUN had analyzed it previously. And if it did, you'll have access to the results regardless of your account plan. I want to show you an example of how you might utilize ANY.RUN to help with your investigation. And to do this, we'll be analyzing an info stealer malware, which is a type of malware that is designed to gather, aka steal, sensitive information such as credentials, cookies, and many more. Hence the name, info stealer. I want you to imagine that you received an alert called malware detected and quarantined. This alert provides you with details such as the hostname, the user, the file location, along with the file hash. I know that many junior SOC analysts would take the hash and utilize OSINT to determine if the file is indeed malicious, and if so, close the alert because, hey, the file had been quarantined. However, an important question that many analysts forget to ask is, how did it get there in the first place? Or does this exist on other endpoints? And if it does, was it executed? If it was, did it spawn any child processes or establish any network connections? And this is where ANY.RUN can help. We'll use the file hash from an info stealer family called formbook, and this is how I would perform my investigation using ANY.RUN if I received a similar alert as a SOC analyst. The first thing that I would do is check if ANY.RUN had analyzed this file previously by using its report section, which you can find on the left-hand side. So I'll go ahead and click on reports, and on the top right, I'll search up the IOC of interest and hit enter. From here, I do see a couple of entries back on October 8th of 2024. I'll go and select the first one from the top. And once I click into this report, I am presented with a lot of information. Before I provide you with the steps, I'll briefly go over this page. So let's start with the right side first. At the top, we can see that ANY.RUN has indicated that there is malicious activity, and it used the operating system of Windows 10 64-bit to perform its analysis. And it also tagged this as payload, formbook, xloader, and stealer. Next, we have a couple of options available for us. The get sample would download the file sample if we wanted to dig into it even more. IOC will show us all of the indicators of compromise for this file. The malconf will display information related to its configuration. Restart will allow you to perform a new analysis of this file. Text report provides you with an overview of what ANY.RUN found during its analysis. Graph is a visualization of the process tree. The attack will provide you the TTPs related to the file. AI summary is a neat feature that will summarize what the file does. And finally, we have export. This is where you can export these findings. Do keep in mind that with a free version, this will only allow you to export the process graph. And although it doesn't show under the export, you can also export the text report as well. And that I mentioned previously. Under these tabs, we now get into the process information, which will contain the parent-child relationship along with the command line that is being used. At the bottom right-hand corner, we get more information about the processes that we select. For example, if I select a child process named purchased order of ENG091.exe, we can see at the bottom right the username, the command line, and also the TTPs associated with this process. Moving on to the left-hand side of the screen, we do get a full playback of the analysis that was performed by ANY.RUN. Underneath the playback, we do have 4 different tabs, which will track network-related events for all processes during the time of analysis. In other words, the information found under these tabs will focus on all of the processes and not just the malicious process. Starting with the first one, we have HTTP requests. This will provide you with all of the HTTP related traffic that was requested during the analysis phase. The Connections tab will contain both UDP and TCP connections made by the processes. The DNS requests are queries that were made, and it will show us if there were any responses. Requests will be shown, even the ones without a response. And finally, we have threats. These are alerts that were generated based on the network traffic by Suricata, which again is an IDS. Now onto the investigation. When I am on this page, the first thing I typically look at is the parent-child relationship, which you can find on the right-hand side. I want to know what this file is doing behind the scenes. Now, if we were to follow the chain of events, I can see that once the file was executed, it immediately established persistence by adding a registry key, which we can see in process ID 3784. If I click on this process, we can see the full command line at the bottom right-hand corner. And what this is doing is that it is creating a registry run key under the current user, where the name of the newly created key is purchased order of ENG01. And the value, aka what will be executed, is purchased order of ENG091.pif under the user's document directory. As an analyst, I now have an idea as to what would happen if the file was to be executed. So I can now begin looking within my environment for not only the file hash, but also the registry run keys that were created, where the value is configured to execute a .pif file extension. We can see right after the persistence was created, a command was invoked with a process ID of 6460, where it was copying this particular executable, the purchased order of ENG091.exe, to the location of our user's document directory to purchased order of eng091.pif. And if you recall, the registry run key was configured to execute this file whenever the user logs in. Shortly after, we do see a reg asm.exe with a process ID of 6224, and this particular executable is used for registering .NET assemblies. And then afterwards, we see an ipconfig.exe with a process ID of 1072. And if we take a look at the command line, it is using a 32-bit version of ipconfig. As an FYI, anytime you see a process spawning under the directory of syswow64, you can infer that the process is a 32-bit process. But do note that just because a 32-bit process was spawned doesn't mean it is 100% malicious. However, you might uncover some interesting activity since a lot of malware typically utilizes 32-bit processes. The next thing I would do is look at the network connection tabs, starting with the HTTP request. ANY.RUN makes it easy for us by assigning a reputation icon next to these HTTP requests. A green checkmark means that this request is known and whitelisted. A question mark is unknown, and a fire icon means that the request is malicious based on ANY.RUN's analysis. Knowing that, I'll start copying all of the indicators that have the unknown and fire icons into my notes and begin searching my environment to see if any other endpoints are calling out to these domains or IPs. So I can ultimately try and identify additional endpoints that might be compromised. The threats tab can be quite useful if my environment is using Suricata, as I can then search for similar alerts within my environment. If you want a quick way to copy all of the interesting IOCs, you can actually go ahead and click on the IOC tab on the top right corner, and then this will provide you with the domains and IPs of interest. The last thing that I'll do is take a look into the malconf tab, and I'll see if there are any interesting strings that I could use to threat hunt within the environment. And that is how I utilize ANY.RUN for my investigation. Now, if time permits, offline analysis can be performed as there is an option to download the PCAP or download the sample itself as mentioned previously. Now, if you are just starting out as a SOC analyst and don't have much experience, I would highly recommend that you utilize the other tabs such as the attack tab to get some additional context around the TTPs, along with using the AI summary to understand what the file is doing. If we click into the attack tab, we can see that there are 4 tactics, 9 techniques with a total of 31 events. Now, let's say that you're interested in the modify registry technique under defense evasion. If you click on it, you'll be presented with what the technique is and how the file is using this technique. So if I go ahead and click on cmd.exe, we can see the command line right here. And this information is incredibly useful to have. Now, if I close this out and go back over to our analysis, if we click on the AI summary tab, a report on the right will start generating and telling us what is happening. Again, incredibly useful to have, especially as a beginner. The next thing I want to show you is how you can analyze a file using ANY.RUN's sandbox. And for this example, I'll be using a different info stealer called Luma Stealer. And I'll begin using the free plan. When you upload a file, it is important to know that the analysis will be public for anyone to view. In other words, do not upload anything that will contain sensitive information. If you're not sure, always consult with your team first. To get started, I'll select Submit File/Email. Once you selected your file of interest, from the upload window, you'll have 2 options. The first one is deep analysis and safe browsing. When it comes to files, you'll want to use deep analysis unless you simply want to browse a URL. Starting from the left-hand side, you'll have the file that you want uploaded, and you can choose where you want to execute the file. So for example, currently it is set to temp directory. I can click on the dropdown. I can have it start from the desktop, user's home directory, downloads directory, app data, Windows, and the root drive directory. You do also have the option to specify the command line as well, which is quite neat. And as a free user, the maximum duration is set to 60 seconds, aka 1 minute. But you do have a total of 5 minutes to perform your analysis. For the network side of things, you can use a fake net or you can route the traffic through a Tor node. On the right hand side, this is where you can select your operating system. Again, as a free user, you'll only have access to Windows 7 32-bit, Windows 10 64-bit, and Ubuntu 22.04 64-bit. And that's about it. Now, if you were to upgrade to a paid plan, aka the Hunter or Enterprise plan, you would then unlock additional options such as more operating system to choose from for deeper analysis. You could also increase your duration. You'll also have more options to choose from to configure your network and applications as well. At the bottom, you might notice that there is a privacy option, and with a paid plan, you can choose who has access to your analysis, which is a neat feature to have. There's an option to select only me, the team, or whoever has a link to that particular analysis. Now, with the free plan, our only option is public. To start your analysis, all we need to do is click on Run a Public Analysis, and you'll get a warning saying that all data will be in the public access in the Public Reports section. If you want to run a private task and use the service for commercial purposes, check out our paid plans. You can go ahead and select I agree. Now, do make sure that you consult with your team before uploading a file to any public sandbox. Once you click on I agree, ANY.RUN will begin its dynamic analysis and we'll get the results on the right. We can now interact with the sandbox itself as well, and any processes and network connections will be recorded. Over on the top right corner, we do see a timer counting down. What we can do is click on Add Time up to 5 minutes. And there you go. But again, by default, it will provide you with a minute for analysis. So I waited for about a minute and a half to see if there are any additional processes that will be generated, but it doesn't look like it. Now, if we go ahead and take a look at the HTTP requests, we can see some fire icons here, which is quite interesting. Going over to connections, let's see here. Scrolling down just a bit, we got a fire icon. And again, remember that the fire icon is malicious. So the process name, which is our file of interest, was seen contacting an IP address of 185.215.113.206 on port 80. And again, we can get a high-level overview by clicking on the IOC tab, but currently we don't see that right now because it is currently analyzing. Now what we can do is go ahead and stop it. Once that's stopped, if we click on IOC, we now have a list of all of the IOCs of interest for this particular file. Now let's try with the paid plan. We'll upload the same file using similar configurations. And as mentioned previously, with the paid option, you now have additional options to configure your network with. And one of those options is to configure your network to act as an HTTPS man-in-the-middle proxy. And that is what I'm going to be using. This will allow us to intercept any SSL TLS traffic. I'll also increase our duration of seconds from 60 to 660, aka 11 minutes. On the right hand side, we now have additional options to select with our operating system, but I am going to just leave it as Windows 10 64-bit. And lastly, under the privacy option, because I am using a paid plan, I do have the option of only me and who has a link, meaning that now I can hide my analysis from the public if I wanted to. But for fun, let's go ahead and select public. And I'll go ahead and run a public analysis. It'll say all data will be in the public access. That is okay. And there you go. Looking at the top right corner, we have 11 minutes. I'll go ahead and add the time to the maximum and just like that. And after about 40 seconds, ANY.RUN already tagged this as Luma, Stealer, possible phishing, and many others. Looking at our HTTP requests, we have, wow, 50. Okay, it's going up. We have a bunch of requests. We do have a lot of connections as well, 79, and 29 DNS requests, and 35 threats. We can see here that the signature that was triggered, ET malware, Win32, Luma Stealer related CNC domain and DNS lookup. So I waited a couple minutes just to see if there are any new processes that were going to be generated, but it doesn't appear to be so, and that is okay. But usually by checking the HTTPS man-in-the-middle proxy, this will allow us to obtain even more information about the file of interest, which then will allow us to search across our environment for additional pivot points. Because let's be honest, not every endpoint is going to have an EDR/antivirus installed. So it is always a good idea to scope out your environment and search for artifacts that a particular IOC is known to communicate with and or download onto the endpoint. One thing I wanted to note here, and speaking of that, interesting, we have 2 new processes that popped up, and doesn't appear to be anything interesting as of yet, but we'll continue to leave this on here. I did want to note that with a paid plan, the network traffic that was generated from our file of interest would be scanned using a more robust IDS rule set, aka the Pro rule set. This includes commercial rules that will help reveal additional information, whereas the free plan only utilizes the free open rule set, and that can sometimes miss threats. For example, let me head over to our free plan here. And this right here is the file that we analyzed on our free plan. And taking a look at the threats tab, we have 23 threats, aka signatures. Now, if I take a look at the Pro plan, we have 35 signatures. And on our free plan, if I were to select one of the signatures, so I'll select the first one, we don't have the ability to see how this alert was generated. If we highlight the Suricata rule, it says Suricata rules are available on Hunter and Enterprise plans. Moving on to the paid plan, let's see how that looks like. So I'll click on one of these signatures and I'll click on Suricata rule. And here we can see exactly how this signature was generated. This could be useful because you'll want to always try and validate how a certain signature was generated. So I am going to stop this analysis because there really isn't much interesting activity happening. And I did want to show you a couple of things for the paid plan. You now have additional formats available to export, such as JSON summary, sticks, HTML document, MISP JSON format, and all data. Remember that the free plan only allows you to export the process graph. And the others are useful, especially if you have some sort of repository to help you keep track of certain threats. For example, if you utilize the MISP platform, you can actually export your analysis to a MISP JSON format and then import it into your MISP instance. Now, if you don't want to do this manually, you can utilize ANY.RUN's API functionality, which is also included in the paid plan. So then you can integrate ANY.RUN into your workflows, and that will save you a lot of time in the long run. Hopefully, by following along, you understand why it is extremely important to spend a couple of minutes to perform analysis on any IOCs that you come across during your investigation. I understand that as a SOC/DFIR analyst, time is extremely limited. So utilizing a tool like ANY.RUN can help you quickly come to a conclusion. ANY.RUN is having a Black Friday deal for teams and individuals, where individuals can get 2 licenses for the price of 1, and teams can get up to 3 licenses, and it will also include their Threat Intel Lookup Basic Plan for a year as a gift. Learn more about the offers in the description down below. Lastly, I want to thank ANY.RUN for sponsoring this video, and I hope that you found this informative. If you want me to do more videos on ANY.RUN, let me know in the comment section down below. And that is it for the video. Remember to stay curious and do things differently.